So to break it down, RDWC, recirculating deep water culture. So that means the water is going to be cycling around and around these pots, which is why they have the reservoir here. So these particular pots are about 25 litres each. That's going to give you about 125 litres worth of water capacity. Even though we wouldn't recommend filling to the brim, about 100 litres seems to be the sweet spot. So what's going to happen is you're going to fill the system up from the reservoir here. The pump is going to circulate the water around and around through the base of these pots. But that's not all that's going to make these plants grow really well. It is the air delivery system, which is included, of course. This nice little air pump here. There's a set of hoses and air stones just like these that situate themselves in the base of each one of these pots. So that's going to be delivering oxygen straight to the roots. You're going to expect faster and better growth from your plants. And we have proven this out in the showroom there. It works really, really well. So that's the essentials when it comes to an RDWC system. Fill it with water, add your nutrient, flick everything on, and around it goes. Now, in some cases, you will be required to change the water depending on the build-up that's going on in there. Otherwise, for a lot of people, they're just going to be topping the water up and everything's just going to go wonderful as long as the nutrients and pH are dialed in. Now, just to give you an idea of what we're working with here in terms of pot size and what it looks like, or bucket size in this particular case with a convenient carry handle, even though you're not going to be moving it very often. Inside the lid here is the wick pot. So for a lot of people, they might think that's quite small, but that is not there to facilitate the full growth of the plant. That is simply to fill with clay balls, which are included in this kit, to support the stem or stalk of your plant, and the roots will grow through underneath. So we've got a little bit of footage of the showroom one to give you an example, but that is the idea behind it. So for a lot of people, they'll be getting huge plant growth out of a pretty compact pot, to be fair. Now, one other thing I haven't mentioned with the system, or a couple things actually, sorry, is the filter that these systems have. So if you do end up transplanting from a dirt or soil medium into this particular system, any crud or crap that's floating around in there is going to get filtered into this. So just keep that in mind. If you do lose water flow, it's probably because this filter just needs a clean, but a nice little addition that we absolutely love to see. Now, one last thing, just over here on the reservoir, let's take a closer look. Down the bottom here, we do have a drain and valve with a standard garden hose size fitting, so you can drain the system nice and easy. And this one up here is actually a fill. So you would hook on a hose, flick it on, and just down in the top here, I don't know if you can quite see that, there's actually a toilet style ball cock valve, in the sense that it's a float, so the system can remain completely topped up at all times. If you wanted to keep a hose permanently on there, easy, or just periodically fill it. It's a nice way of adjusting it to set a water level for the system. And just on the side here, it's a little bit difficult to see, but there's actually a float, or sorry, a water level indicator that has a small bead that floats up and down in this tube when there's water in it. So that pretty much encompasses the simplicity of the system. They're really not that sophisticated in terms of operation, but they've got some nice quality of life features that do make these a really nice system to work with. For something that's stepping in a little more of a serious direction than something like an auto pot, we highly rate these. So let's get into actually putting one of these together, eh? So believe it or not, everything in that entire system fits in this pretty well compact box. So you can be assured that it's all going to arrive in essentially one package and get there pretty darn safe. And of course, just as everyone likes it, discreet packaging. So let's get into it and I'll pull everything out and show you guys what we're working with. Alrighty, so now that we've got everything out of the box, I'll just quickly run you through what we're working with here. Assortment of PVC pieces, so those are going to be your flow pipes that join all the pots together. Got a valve, we've got some assorted more PVC bits that will connect to the pump. Wick pots, like I said earlier, clay balls to make life easy. This is the little submersible water pump, water filter, the drain, the fill pipe. We have an assortment of little rubber grommets. We have check valves for the air lines, which we'll be covering the install of that. The air stones, the air pump, air hose, and we have some PTE plumber's tape effectively. So we're going to use that for the assembly because it is good to keep things watertight, obviously. Okay, so beyond that, we've got the little tube, which I guess will indicate your water level, the pot lids, and the pots themselves. So when we get into this, I usually start with laying the pots out in their correct orientation. So that's where we're going to start. All right, so best thing to do is start with the instruction booklet that's provided. And it's not too much of instructions, it's more of a template or a diagram to show you how it's laid out, which will get you up and running, of course. We're here to cover the nitty gritty. So like I said, starting with the pot layout is the best way to go. Now, you'll find that the pots, they're not all identical. They do have holes punched in different places. So you want to make sure you've laid that out according to the diagram. At least in this case, this is how we have laid it out. And we've just placed the PVC interconnecting pieces around to give you an idea of how that's all going to go together. So just make sure the pots are in the correct orientation to start with, and you've laid the PVC components out like so. Now what we'll do from here is we're actually going to start screwing together all these PVC pipes and connecting the pots together. So I'm just kicking off the assembly here just in one of the corners. I've got the reservoir here in the first pot just over here. Now with this particular PVC, they do come pre-assembled and pre-glued in this case. So what you want to do is you want to remove the coupling or the seal joint on both ends. So these can be a little tight if they have been sealed up in transit there. You might need someone to just help you loosen those off, but in this particular case, no problem at all. They just hand wind off. So I'll just screw that off there and this one off here. So once you've got these apart, you'll find that you've got 2 seals per fitting. Okay, so let me just peel that one off. So peel one off each end, just like so. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to poke these through the pot, like so, and then what you're going to do is take the O-ring, the rubber seal, and just poke that back over the fitting like that. And then from there, you'll just take the PVC and screw it all together. So just going to hand tighten that up. And to be fair, hand tightening actually works just fine in this case, especially if you've got a bit of grip strength, but in some cases you might just want to use a tool just to tighten that up, whether it's a pair of poly grips, pipe grips, or something like that. But what I'm going to do is just tighten this up so you guys can see what it's going to look like. So it's one end, and just making sure you've got the rubber seal on both sides, because you're not going to have a seal without that. So just tighten that up like so. Alright, so now that we've completed the main structure, or at least the easy part of it, we have the artery feed up the centre of the 4 pots here. So what I'm going to show you is how that all goes together. Now in the instructions they do say to use PVC glue to assemble components like this together. Now I will mention we've actually done these, what we'd call them dry, with no glue on our showroom system. No problems at all, no leaks. If you do want to do that, no stress at all, just water test it, or at least when you do fill it with water, just check to make sure you've got no leaks, which you'll probably do anyway. So in this case, we are doing it without glue. If you did want to go down the route of glue, you can purchase that from your local hardware store, very, very cheap, just PVC pipe glue. Now, we're not going to do that, so what I'm going to show you is how this all goes together. So we've got these 2 parts here which are going to connect from these 2 pots to this T-piece. So the easiest way to put that together is I'm going to just slip that on top. I'm just going to pop that around, tap it in, nice and easy. Same thing for the other side. Good to go. So I'm just going to screw these fittings out, and I'm going to just interconnect that between the pots. Sorry, before I do that, I am just going to wind this one out here. So I got those 2 fittings for each end of the pot. Those are long fittings. That one there, that one there. We've got the valve, so same story. I'm just going to rest the valve in there. Tap, tap. That's that one right there. And then we have the filter. So the filter screen is designed to go in this direction towards the reservoir there from down this end. Now I will show you here. So these actually have 2 fittings that when you get them out of the box, these 2 fittings are just going to be loosely screwed on there. So this is actually where that PTFE tape, or the plumber's tape, is going to, could you just pass me the tape there, Cameron? Thank you very much. So this is plumber's tape. Now for a lot of people, you've probably never used this before. No worries at all. I'm going to show you how to use this stuff. So what you're going to do is you're just going to pull start to unravel it like so. And the trick is, what you do is you take your fitting, or the threads here, and you're just going to lay it on, hold it with your thumb, and then you're just going to wrap it around, just like this, and around and around. So we're going to do that a good handful of times just to build up some thread tape on the threads. And then I'm just going to hold it, pull, just like that. So that one's easy as. I'm just going to do that for the other side, unravel a piece, just line that up, hold it with my thumb, and just work this around like so. And that is how you apply thread tape in a relatively easy way. Now the trick is to wind the thread tape around the same way that the threads of the fitting are going, because if you do it the other way, it's going to try wind itself off. So in this case, I'm just going to take the fitting and just wind it on like so. Now if you put a lot of thread tape on there, it's going to be relatively tight. That's probably a good thing. I could probably put a little bit more on here because that was quite easy. I'm just going to wind those fittings on there. Again, you might end up using a tool if your hands can't crank it over. No stress at all. Just tighten that up like so. So that is that all put together. And I'm just going to assemble that onto the end of the valve here. Same story. Tap, tap. And then we have the final piece here, which is going to go into the reservoir. Same story. I'm just going to slip that in there and then tap that all together. So that is pretty much a good to go assembly. We've got a fitting down here which I'll wind out and thread into the reservoir, and then we just have the two ends going into the pots down this end. So I'll put this all together now. Remember, one O-ring each side, so there, and push an O-ring on there. Alright, O-ring there. Beautiful. So that's the main water flow circulation for this entire system put together. Very easy, very straightforward, and relatively tool-free, to be fair. We haven't done anything too fancy here to pull this together. So now that we've covered that, let's get into the little auxiliary items, like let's fit the pump next. All right, so with the water pump here, you'll see it's got an inlet and an outlet. Don't worry about the power supply, we'll cover that soon. And we're gonna work with these fittings here. So you can, again, use a bit of PTFE or plumber's tape on the end of these. I'm actually not too stressed about that because this is a completely submersed assembly, so a little bit of water leakage is no problem. So what we're gonna do is just thread that on the top there, or the outlet, just like so, and then we're going to thread the inlet on the front. Now there is actually a little O-ring on the inlet, no stress at all there, so you can just tighten that on like so. Now this is the pump assembly, so we're just going to pop that in the reservoir now, so we'll just come up and over the top, and I'm just going to put that in the pipe here that's coming from the filter like so. Now if you can have a look in there, I'll just move the light around. How we've put that together. So we've got the outlet of the pump, I'll just rotate that so you can see. So the outlet and the inlet coming from over here on the filter. If we just pan over the top here. So it's just coming through the filter and back up and into the pump and then to the outlet, which is just going to be in the reservoir there. So let's move on to the other items that are going to be fitted in here. Right, up next on the reservoir we have the drain pipe. So this has just got a barbed end, and down the bottom of your reservoir here there's actually a pre-fitted O-ring. So what we're going to do is we're just going to wiggle that inside the O-ring, just twist and push with a bit of force. Easy as that. So that's ready for you to connect on a garden hose or something like that to drain the system if need be, but we're just going to set that in the closed position because we don't want it leaking as soon as you fill it up. From there we have the filler valve. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to wind off the end of this fitting, and what you'll see on it is an O-ring. So we're just going to take that O-ring, we're going to leave the O-ring on there, and we're just going to feed it through the hole at the top, and we're going to tighten on that locking nut again. So what that's going to do is expose some threads when I get this all tightened up. Easy as that. And then I'm going to take the little garden hose fitting that it came with for filling. I'm just going to tighten that on. That's got an O-ring in there, so that's pretty much good to go. Now, if you just pop the camera up over the top here, we can see this is actually the float valve. So the way you'd adjust this is you'd essentially set the float where you want the water level to stop, and then you're just going to tighten the locking nut. So as the water level rises, it's going to lift and close the valve. So there might be a little bit of trial and error here, but the idea is that this is just going to be an auto fill system when you have a hose obviously plumbed up to that and turned on. So I think some people will use that. A lot of people might not. They might just manually fill the water because of course you want to adjust your pH and add your nutrients at the same time, but nice to know it's there. Right, so now that we have finished that, let's look at the little bag of fittings we have over here and the water level pipes. So I'll just open this up here. We have a whole bunch of little black rubber fittings that look incredibly easy to lose, but we're not too worried about that right now. I'm going to open up the bag that was within the bag, and that's got the tiny little orange or red bead there, and another little fitting. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the right angle fitting, which has got a little push lock on it. Just going to take the hose and push it in like so. All right, so just on the side of the reservoir here, there's a tiny little hole down the bottom. We're just going to take our pipe that we have here with that little angle on it. We're going to take one of these rubber fittings. I hope you can see that. It's got a little hole up the center of it. We're just going to poke the rubber fitting into the hole. Wiggle that in there like so. Take our right angle fitting, just poke that in there. Nice tight fit. We're going to take what looks like a Lego hand and another one of those rubber grommet O-ring things. Poke the rubber grommet O-ring in the top hole, because there's actually a little tiny one right up here. Here, let me make that a little more obvious for you guys. I've got a light here so you can see that right there, nice and easy. I'm going to take this rubber O-ring, just same story, just feed that in there and wiggle it in and push. Take the Lego hand, poke that in so the Lego hand is facing towards the pipe, and then we're just going to clip pipe on like so. So that is your water level indicator, and last but not least, the tiny little red bead, which you don't want to lose, and just drop that in the pipe. So as the water level rises, you're going to see that little red bead come up. So for a lot of people, they probably won't use this, to be fair, depending on where they're looking in the orientation, but it's nice to have. Alrighty, so we've got all the air components laid out. So we've got the air pump, of course. We have these little check valves. We have the air stones. We have, in previous, we opened up that bag of little black grommets. Here's 4 of those that I've just placed here. They're probably quite hard to see. And we have the air line. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by installing the non-return valves. Now effectively we're going to cut a short piece of hose and install these right on the outlet of these 4 pumps here. So the idea is that if the pump does turn off, it's not going to siphon water through the air stone and back through the pump and cause damage. So I'm just going to take my snips here. You can use a pair of scissors, anything like that, and we're just going to cut a bunch of short pieces of hose like so. So I'm just going to cut handful of these. 4 pieces will do. Like so. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to install these valves. Now they do actually have a direction on them. They only go one way. So what we're going to do is we're going to, you want the out, you can probably barely see that, the out is facing away from the pump. So that's the outlet. So what we're going to do on the inside, I'm just going to wiggle this black hose on. That's one. Now this kind of hose is relatively solid, but it will soften up over time, especially with a little bit of heat. So if you do actually struggle getting these fittings on any of these components here, I'd recommend just soaking the end of the hose in a cup of warm or hot water, and that'll soften it right up, make it a lot more malleable to work with. So that's all 4 hoses. Now I'm just going to install these one by one on the outlet of the pump. Again, I'm just wiggling those on. All right, so that's our 4 outlets right there. And then from here, we're just going to move on to the pots. Here on your 4 main pots, you're going to see there is a small hole up towards the top. This is where your air line is going to feed in. But before you run any hose through it, you actually want to install a little rubber grommet that we had laid out before. So this is 1 per pot. So just to clarify, you're just going to wiggle that and feed it in through the hole there. And then from there, your air line is just going to poke through the center of this grommet. Let me just wiggle that in there. It's a nice tight fit, which is a good seal. And so just for example, this is what we're going to do on 1. You're going to, of course, do this on all 4. And then from there, you're going to take your air stone just here, and we're going to drop that inside the pot for reference of where it's going to go. So of course, you're going to do that on all 4. And then from here, we're going to take our hose and we're going to install from the air stone through the rubber grommet and to our air pump. Now, in terms of air pump placement, we'd probably recommend situating this somewhere in the center of the system, so all 4 of these hoses can connect nice and easy. So let's just give you an example. All right, so just pulled some hose through there. Now it is a really tight fit, which is a good thing for the sake of having a watertight seal, but for a lot of cases, I'd probably recommend putting a little bit of lubricant on there, whether it's a bit of cooking oil, a bit of Vaseline, something quite neutral that's just gonna help lubricate that hose as it gets pulled through. So, got plenty of excess here, and we're just going to take the air stone, and same dealio, push that on there, and just drop that down in the base. So you just want enough hose so that the air stone can just sit in the bottom, And then from here, we're going to take the excess and run this off to the air pump. All right, so we've just got the hose here and you're going to cut it to length, of course, and then we're just going to slip it onto the outlet of this non-return valve. So you're going to repeat that on all 4 air stones, just like so. And as I said, you can just situate this air pump in the center here. Now, I will also mention this particular pump does actually have an adjustment on the top of it for how much airflow it's going to be delivering. We would probably recommend just crank that up to full power and plug this in and let this run full time, delivering as much oxygen as possible to the roots. They're going to absolutely love it. So that wraps up the air system. It is that simple, just an air stone in the base of the pot, connected via these tubes and to the air pump. So really that easy. So now let's just wrap up this and take it out to the showroom and show you guys what it actually looks like in practice. Alrighty, so just out here in the showroom we have our original system that we've been running for quite some time now. Now fundamentally it is the same. Of course we just had those slight tweaks to the way the pipes will run and making it a little more compact to fit in a 1.2 system. So if you take a look here, we've just rested the lids on top. We have the wick pots with the clay balls, of course, that are provided with the plant coming out the top. Now I'll just lift that up so you can sort of see what's going on. It is a bit hectic in there, but what you'll see is we've got our air lines running out the sides of the pot to our air delivery system, and this particular system, this entire system actually doesn't run full time for us. These systems do shut down overnight, and that's because power turns off to all of the tents out here, so it's a little bit rough on them, but we have proven that it still does work quite well. Now, in fundamental principle, we've got our reservoir in here, which we have buried, which I probably wouldn't recommend unless you had a hose hooked up to it. So you do want a little bit of access to that to check your nutrients, add your nutrients and whatnot. But once you've done that, you've topped it up, you can see our water levels just down here. And what's happening here is the system is obviously recirculating around and around with air delivery, and the plants have been having a pretty good time. We've had a few cold snaps here in Auckland, which has been quite rough on them, but we still are, I don't know if you can quite see that, we are actually getting some fruit off these tomatoes. Now, to say the least, we do actually harvest, I eat the tomatoes as soon as they are ripe because they're just so darn delicious. But that pretty much wraps up the Hydroflo system in a nutshell, an absolutely fantastic and compact system. And again, in a tent, this is actually a bit of an oversized tent for one of these systems, you could fit 2 in there, no problem at all. So we're absolutely wrapped, and we think you guys are going to like them too. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, get in touch with us here at Herbal House. Thanks for watching.